economies initiative. There's energizing education as well, where, and I think it's particularly interesting that these programs are situated in these areas, because what happens is it then creates that curiosity to also for people to then realize that okay, this thing works here. So it's then a way for people to understand that okay, that is then a way to then spread the word and understand that you can this actually works, right? And then moving on from that is not just installing the systems, but also then making sure that whoever that is installing it is building capacity to make sure that people that then utilize them know what they're doing, rather than having to go hire somebody from India or China to come and train your people. Why don't you do it yourself here? We see people like the NESP, the MPSP as well, even the GIs are rolling out programs like the GGG, that's the Growing Green Jobs. There's the NESP with their programs as well. So, and I think that these are quite important because what they have done is they have been able to catalyze local content within the space that we are in Nigeria, train the youth on how to prepare themselves for the growing demand of jobs. Because I mean, as far back as when my father was maybe looking for a job, there was nothing like energy economists, right? And I'm an energy economist today. So just having to like create that availability for people to know that these things exist there. So tying it back to what NOMAP is currently doing, I would like to answer this from the perspective of, like I earlier said in my introduction of who we are and what we do, we are essentially sort of solving the problems around what currently exists in the market. And I would relate this back to when we first came into the market as far back as say 2018, not so far anyway. We realized that some of the early days, I mean, I have sort of been here since maybe say 2015, 16, not quite, not a long time. But I remember that it was very difficult to even to get data. Literally, for you to live in Abuja and figure out a way to find local rural communities in as far back as Plateau or even Kaduna or even just to install systems, and you literally had to go over there yourself to find those areas. And this is not just one community that you're installing. So with NOMAP, what we've done, what we did around ensuring and creating adoption for renewable energy system was first, there was data unavailability. So what we did was at the time, which thankful to what SC4 has then done now, where you can then, with the point of your computer and just your laptop, you can then find accessible locations in Nigeria where you can install systems. So prior to that, there was pretty much almost nothing as far back as 2018. So what we did was we sort of partnered with the REA and did a little bit of scoping around some communities in the north and somewhere up in the south as well. Did all of that to sort of figure out how we can create like availability of communities where people can install systems, because the thing is I've realized that once you install systems in those local communities, they're the ones that see the benefit of it first, and it starts to catalyze the economic development within their areas, and they start to realize that okay, I can use this to solve this problem, and then it goes further than that. So with no map, back to the question again, having done that with data and intelligence, we then did that with consumer payments. I mean, some of the developers in the room today will realize that, would know that it's really not so easy to vend. Essentially, you would have to figure out a way to make sure that your customer that probably hasn't used the bank account like 5 years ever in his or her life now has to figure out a way to pay. So what we also then did in that area was to figure out a way to sort of merge integration between the fintech banking companies and then the rural customers in the communities, in the villages, and then the developers as well. So we've done that, and then going to what we currently then do today is essentially just figuring out a way to make sure that people in these communities have a way to sell their product and even be sustainable on their own. So essentially, starting from where we've come in the sense of figuring out a way to make sure that these systems itself are quite concrete enough and not just subpar, to then seeing institutions or organizations like the RA itself figuring out a way to ensure that there's capacity building, to then the development organizations itself, and then now figuring out a way to then make sure that even the communities themselves are sustainable. So I think in all of this, we've been able to see snippets and plugins of where we've been able to create adoption and even create the realities of what exists with accepting renewable energy systems.
Okay, that's really great. Thank you, Jennifer, for those points. I'll be asking a similar question to you, Ibilola. Can you briefly give an overview of strategies to enhance public awareness of the adoption of renewable energy and energy efficient practices, and also tie it into what SC4 is doing around that?
Okay, so I will answer this from a communications perspective. First, I will say that some of the strategic ways are, one, there has to be some sort of incentives, for people to participate or adopt renewable energy technology, or even just, just own it in their homes and all of that. But I think even this thing with green buildings as well, just getting your offices or even your establishments, whether you're new constructions or renovations, make sure that they're standardized according to the green building codes that are being developed now. Going to, it's a way of influencing other establishments. Setting Bank did it with their bank for credit just about a few months ago. Also got an award, for the building and stuff. So the third thing would be advocacy, which is like my thing. Um, I think that with communications and advocacy, you sort of have to segment society, so it's, for example, what sort of advocacy do they require to be able to adopt renewable energy? So, for example, we have something called the off-grids, where we sort of get people that have completely transitioned off-grid their home systems to the solar system, for example. And we've sort of interviewed quite a lot of people, and you won't believe that there's a community of over 5,000 people who have joined like this Telegram chat, and they are just trying to transition their home systems, to complete use of complete dependence on solar panels. And I feel like that's one way that we've sort of helped to get people to transition. So that's a segment of society. Another segment of society is our communities or rural areas or peri-urban areas. Um, we have done a few advocacy. For example, I'll speak about the one we did at Petty. Now, for that society, what we needed to do was to help them transition the clean cooking technologies. So this is a society where women 30 a.m. every day and have to travel almost 20 kilometers to fetch. And I mean, we went there, and again, in speaking to them, they were willing, but one of the things we discovered was that the existing clean cooking technologies do not fit their lifestyles. They have to cook for 30 people per meal. What is available is usually something very small. And so it was a way for us to go back and say, well, we probably need to design something that fits, we need to change this product design and get something that fits so that this is the way they can properly transition. We have to also, make sure that they, we meet them at their point of need, for a better language. So that's another segment of society. Um, Another segment of society that, and again, I'm beginning to talk about what we do at the Energy Transition Office is, for example, the cement industry. Now there are three major players, for example, Nigeria, Dangote, Bua, and Lafarge. And one of the things that we're doing, getting them to transition, is they've started using or adopting alternative fuels in the process of making cement. And that for us is useful because then the carbon intensity of what they're doing reduces. Again, another segment of society. So if you all of these groups and all of these ways that we're speaking and meeting people. Now, what Energy for All is doing generally is that they work with governments and they have projects, programs, and initiatives. So, for example, in Nigeria, they working Nigerian government, Kenyan government, and Ghanaian government on energy transition initiatives. In Sierra Leone, for example, they're working on healthcare, electrification across the hospitals. In Zambia, in Asia, and what I call the island nations like Barbados and all of that. And then she mentioned the integrated energy resource tool as well that we have developed. We recently layered it with the diesel genset data. We spent quite a lot of money and time and resource to do a study of the diesel generating sets in Lagos. And one of the things that we found was that There are about 45 million power that those generating could power like 4 countries, African countries. I've forgotten the name of the countries at the moment, but yes. So these are some of the things that we're doing as an organization to help all transition to renewable energy
Okay.
technologies.
Thank you, Bilola, for all those points. I like the way you took it through different sectors because we know that for us to truly transition, we have to go through the various sectors. So that was good to hear. So I'll be handing over to Jacqueline now. Similar question, which is, can you provide or give us an overview of strategies to enhance public awareness of the adoption of renewable energy and energy efficient practices? And you could also tie it into the work that you do at Clean Tech Hub.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. So I would say education campaigns, so things such as webinars, schools campaigns. So like we have like a schools program where we go to, we're in a couple of schools in Abuja where we go in there time to time and we educate them on careers and renewable energy trends, and all of that. We also work with women in communities where we educate them on like clean cooking practices and a number of other things. We're doing that in about 7 states right now in Nigeria. There's also, so we also have like an e-learning platform. I think I mentioned that, where we also put templates and resources for people, anything you want to get or read about renewable energy, that sort of thing. We also do community level work, like I already mentioned. Also, we just concluded a project, or we're rounding up a project where we went into communities in Abuja. We got a fund to go into communities in Abuja and educate women on clean cooking practices and all of that. Another thing that I can say that we do is working with government. So we've been able to work in Ondo and Delta State with the government to, create renewable energy policies, which have been implemented, to enable citizens adopt renewable energy practices. And that's just a few of the things that we've done. Also, we're currently running, so like I'd mentioned when I was speaking on the things that we do, I said we run incubator and accelerator programs. So what we do is, because we're very gender focused, I would like to say we're gender biased to a large extent. Most of these incubation programs are mainly for women-led startups, to encourage them to get into the sector or to grow their businesses. And so we run these programs, and then at the end of the course, the winner gets a grant, and then a few other runner-ups get some funding here and there. So we're currently running one. It's called the She Sustains. We just finished the first cohort. The second cohort is starting in November. Last year, we did another one for women as well, women-led businesses, which was the Rev Up initiative, and which we just concluded that one last year. The She Sustains is going to be 3 cohorts. So those are sort of some of the things that we're doing.
That's lovely. Thank you for all those points, Jacqueline. I think a lot of us here know who Clean Tech Hub is in the sector, been here for many years, doing a lot of great work around advocacy, opening up the sector, allowing people to come in and also have a place within the sector. So very quickly, we'll be moving on to the next category where we'll be talking about energy efficiency. I think I like this topic because I know that Nigeria generally, we might not be used to it, but I think with this band A, band B, and the migration, we have to get used to it. I've seen people bringing up templates, timetables on how they power their ACs, washing machines, and everything. So I think this is something that we can very quickly pick up some points that we could implement in our houses. So I'll be starting with Jennifer again to ask, how can consumers ensure they incorporate energy efficient practices in their daily energy consumptions? Maybe some strategies or pointers for people.
Sure. I think I'll answer this from 2 perspectives, right? I'm a consumer, of course. This supplies my power in my house. But prior to that, before answering on that leg, I would answer from the leg of someone that's handled operations and maintenance before, essentially building power systems and figuring out a way to make it work. So you go into these communities, and the first thing you see is, well, practical experience. And the outputs of your AC essentially is what they're using, essentially like making or suiting their refrigerators to make it work. And you can imagine your AC is 2.5 horsepower, right? And then they're using that same outdoor for a fridge that typically the whole thing is probably less than 1 kilowatt. So, and then, I mean, yeah, the really good developer wants to make money because if you connect the system, yeah, he's going to make more money. But in the long run, I mean, who are we deceiving? It's not going to make any sense. So, one of the things that I like to say is use yourself as an example first, right? You supply power to these people, right? And they already paying per kilowatt hour something that is way expensive than what we pay in the town here. So what I did at the time was, or what we did at the time was, okay, how about since you already have a refrigerator and you have a shop that you use it in, how about I bring you a more sustainable one, a more energy efficient one. I replace it. We run the numbers, right? So that we can both see what it is essentially, right? So you power your refrigerator with your AC outdoor unit for at least do it for about 1 week or 1 month. When you pay that cost and you come back to yell that, oh, your cost is way too high, and I tell you what you can do to live a lot way better at a cheaper rate, you then substitute to maybe say a lot more efficient refrigerator, and you see what that price is. When one person is used as an example, every other person in the community starts to key into it. And it's not just in this example, right? This goes as far as even them, because I mean, like we would always say, you bring power to a very off grid, they literally haven't had power all through their lives. And then you put power in that, the first thing they tell you is, no, my neighbors must know I have lights. So literally all their bulbs are on like 24/7, it never goes off. But then they come back to you at the end of the month to say, my power has finished. What did I do? I didn't do anything. But I'm like, you left your power. It's maths. It's literally mathematics. A 5 watt bulb times 24 hours, do the number. That is how much you literally have spent. Right. So on that base, so it took a lot of reorientation and letting them know that yes, everybody literally knows that there's power, and then letting them understand that well then it's costs the cost implication falls back on you because you have to pay for it. It's not CSR. So I mean, all of those things, and then having to understand that okay, this is here, it's not going anywhere, but then we also have to be smart about how we use it. So these were some of the ways in which I made sure that in the rural communities where I had power existing in, of course, as much as I wanted these guys to pay me for the power that they were using, I needed them to also use it in a lot more efficient way. So bringing it back to Bandi users here in the town, right? I would say first things first. I think the easiest thing is to. I mean, I don't think we are really worrying about lumens at the moment. Switch your 30 watt bulbs to 5 watt bulbs or 15 watt bulbs. It will do you. I mean, you might not necessarily like figure how substantial it is in the moment, but after a while, you start to see what those something called an inverter. And I would always say that see at the back instead of the number plate, always run the math yourself. Sometimes you see certain things tagged as energy efficient, and then the watt is still probably going to hold maybe say 2 kilowatt or something. When you can see the non-inverter is sometimes has maybe say lesser than that. So for me, it's always, I mean, like I would always say, like look at the number plate of what you're look at the plate of what you're looking at or of what you're buying. Make sure it's quite efficient. Compare things, right? There's no need to rush into purchases. Even back in the houses, anywhere we are, you really are not using anything, turn it off. Um, and I think it mostly pertains to light bulbs. I don't think we really take into account how very minute they are, but how it's like small but mighty. They do a lot in terms of the number of hours that they run. Because your washing machine probably just runs for about an hour and it stops, right? Your water heater probably runs for about a couple of hours and it stops. Your teapot that you're brewing your coffee in just runs for about a couple of minutes and then it stops. But then your light bulb is literally just there for a very long time. And by the time you multiply, I mean, I'm sure everybody here probably have less than 5. At most, we're doing 15, or sorry, we're doing maybe say 7 if you calculate maybe say 4 already in the system room. So all of those numbers start to pile up. So I think the most important thing is be at rest because at the end of the day, if you're not quite calculative of all of these things and really seeing what the numbers are, you end up realizing that you spend so much. I think, I mean, like she said, everybody right now is calculating, okay, I spent 20K right now buying power. You go and check how much meat you just got. I think it's also good to do those things because really nobody really does it for you if you didn't do it by yourself. So I think that's one of the ways I think it's quite important for
Yeah.
us to be energy efficient.
Yes. So, really great points, Jennifer. I like the way you drew it from the rural areas where we know they have very limited appliances and how they are practicing energy efficiency to us in the urban areas and what we can do. I know currently all this we're talking about also has an impact on the national grid because one, if we're exploring more renewable energy technologies in our homes, we're able to reduce the strain of it on the national grid. And additionally, if we're able to have energy efficient appliances or being able to practice energy efficiency, we're also reducing the strain on the national grid. So I'll be handing over to Ibilola now just to draw from her experience in communications at SE for All to give us some practical energy efficient tips that we can adopt to also in line with this.
So my first thing is just go upgrade. But looks like that's what everybody's doing, you know. It's I know it's expensive, you know, let's be honest, it's expensive to transition completely. For everyone who has, I haven't, for everyone who has, and I told you there's this community of people who have. Some people have done it, they've been living off grid, they haven't paid for electricity in 5 years. They haven't, there are people like living and breathing, you know, so it's an option to go off grid. I know some of us like, you know, I like AC on, like, don't stress me, like, I'm walking, I need to have my AC on, you know, but going off grid also means a lifestyle change. It means that you're going to have to, like both of them have said, calculate things. So, for example, I use the washer during the day. You know, when will you put on the water heater? You know, that kind of thing. I feel like it's too stressful for me, like legit. But honestly, going off grid, you know, looks like the answer right now. The other thing is for those of us who choose to remain on grid and will have to pay electricity tariffs, is that you know, and let me give you an example. I went to a school. We teach like 5-year-olds. I'm sorry, between 6 and 10-year-olds about energy transition and climate stuff. And they asked two questions. One, like, okay, if the Earth is perishing, why don't you just move to a second Earth? You know, so that let this one just burn. You know, where is that coming from? But then, you know, they also wanted to know how they could save the Earth by, you know, putting off the light. So if you think about it, you know, I mean, again, nobody's saying go and be a hero, be a champion of climate and stuff. But you know, if we were to just focus on reducing pressure on the grid, then yes, you know, all of the things that Jennifer has said. But then, you know, use the fan, don't use the AC. Use electric cookers and not gas cookers. Um, Someone may say that that may cost more, but you know, it's give or take. There's also this cooking method I think I just learned about recently, where you don't have to use either electricity or gas. Um, you know, just generally conduct an energy audit of, I mean, of your home. Like you said, I needed to buy an AC a few months back, and I was like, okay, I kept asking, please, can you, you know, check the AC, check the back. What does this say? What does this say? You know, I think, like Jennifer said, those numbers add up, and so I think these are the ways that we can just manage pressure on the grid.
Okay.
But my advice is go off grid.
Lovely. Thank you, Bella, for this point. I think, yes, we see a lot of people kind of integrating. So maybe they have panels on their house, on their roofs that can carry the daytime load. 'Cause I saw someone that did a really extensive Excel sheet on time for our family, how everybody time blocks the usage of power. And I thought, okay, type A, but really effective. Yes. Okay, so in that same light, Jacqueline, could you please just share some tips that you could on this same
Okay,
topic?
so I feel like they've both answered the question excellently well, but I mean, I would just add maybe using Energy Star rated appliances. So if you look around now, we have all those, their ACs, their TVs, their refrigerators that, you know, they say, oh, this saves 70% of, you know, so those sort of appliances. And of course, I would also say switching to LED lights from incandescent lights, light bulbs as well. That could help as well. But I feel like they've spoken on everything that I had planned to say.
Okay, that's very fine. I think we've given some really great points here on this. I think these are things we could track. Depends on the level of time, and I think it's not really a time thing. I think it's how the pocket pinches you that you would decide what it is time for in your own household and how you want to take into practice some of the things
May
we
I
have
add
said.
something to that?
Of course.
I mean, I know that I'm not sure that Nigeria practices this, but I know that there's something called a time of use, where depending on what time of the day, I mean, I know in most developed countries, right, it is depend because I mean, power comes from different sources. So there is maybe say the grid, and then those are selling back parts of the grid in terms of feeding tariff or how it may be. So there's a time of use system where it's cheaper for you to use your appliances sometimes in the day because of course it's coming from solar versus you using it maybe say sometime in the evening. So some of those methods could also apply. I mean, I don't know where some of our listeners are maybe say watching from. So you just need to figure out if it's relative to what is obtainable in your country.
Yeah, the peak and off-peak periods.
Yeah.
I think there are some of those.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the next part of the conversation now, where we'll be talking about information gaps. So I know there are different kinds of people here currently. There's people online also, and we know people are in different stages of their career in the sector and the amount of information that they have. And we know information is power. What makes the difference is how you use it and what access to information that you have. So now we'll be speaking on providing clear and accessible information on government policies, incentives, and available financing options for energy solutions. I'll be starting this particular segment from Jacqueline. Jacqueline, could you, from your experience, Clean Tech Hub or speaking broader, some available financing options? So this could tie into either individuals looking to transition, but majorly companies that are looking to enter into this space, because we know, again, the entire goal of what we're talking is how we can enhance energy access in Nigeria nationwide. And we know that it's a work for a lot of people, given the 90 million plus people that are currently unelectrified. So if there's a person watching or logged in here that is looking that, okay, I have an idea, I have a business, or I'm looking to start a business, how can I come in? What are the options? Because we know finance is really key, because if not, anybody could just, but how can you speak on around finance and how companies are looking to come into the sector, and what are the easy things that they can do or the very low hanging fruit in terms of financing that they can very quickly access?
Okay, thank you very much. So I would say there's some government grants and incentives, the tax credits that they give, and then there are also some pay as you. I mean, you can pay installmentally to earn. And additionally, I know REA is starting the DARES DARES program, where they're going to provide funding for people to be able to, for people to be able to access funding to purchase or go explore renewable energy options. Then in communities, I would also say working with communities to, there's a funding. So now there's this project that we're doing with René Lemoyne Institute, and we're doing it in 5 communities. And what they're doing is they're working with us to enable the communities to be able to, they're going to finance them to be able to build their own mini grids and give them the option to, so it's going to be like a two-way funding. They bring part of the funding, and then the community will also bring part of the funding, and then they'll be able to build their own mini grids, and then with the option of managing it by themselves, and then they will sort out however what the modalities would be. So those are 2 ways I can speak on that people can, tap into financing for renewable energy.
I'll be going on to Ibilola. Can you speak on government policies and available financing options from your experience or your knowledge that people can also use to harness, that people can harness around energy access adoption?
Okay, just want to remind everyone, I'm still a communications person, but I've soaked in a lot from our finance team. So I understand that financing for projects can be either through grants, debt, or equity, or a blend. I hope they're proud of me. So I hope they're proud of me. In terms of financing, I can tell you that like Nigeria is, for lack of a better word, littered with renewable energy projects, and they are at different stages, right? And they all need, so if you think about financing, there's financing for maybe homes or small projects, there's financing for large scale projects. And some small scale projects, they have issues with getting financing from places because they're not viable. Many commercial banks or even people that give infrastructure loans or whatever don't think that they're viable enough. And so that is something that we now try to do at the Energy Transition Office. We do something called project preparation, which is that we take on or we approach some of these projects and ask and help them prepare for financing that they can get through any of these either debt, grants, or a blend. In Nigeria or through SA4All, for example, SA4All has a facility called Universal Energy Facility, UEF. They give grants to certain businesses and projects who now go and implement those in communities. So that is one way, and I think once you're able to meet their criteria, you're given that grant. That's one. Two, there are. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember this organization. They're banks, that are committed to that. I use Sterling Bank a lot because I feel like they're very green in terms of their approach and their thinking. I like what they're doing, for example, with e-mobility for three-wheelers, for example. Almost similar to what I don't know if it was GIZ did with that Bamu project a while ago. So there are all of these buckets of financing. But in terms of policy, I think that may be where it always sometimes appears to be shifting. Again, there's the political side of stuff. People coming with their own agenda, and they're allowed to. So you can have policy that says, okay, for example, it's electric vehicle, and then another policy that says, okay, no, we'll first start with CNG. So then what do you do? Where do you invest? And that could be a problem for people that are trying to get into the space. But I will always say that, look, anything that you're convinced about, if you've looked at the figures, because at the end of the day, you're trying to do a business, you're trying to raise money, whether you're trying to do climate-friendly projects or energy transition-friendly projects, you're still trying to make money. So if you look at the numbers, not numbers that you think that you're thinking about or you're developing from space, but the ones that, the reality of look at the numbers, whatever makes sense, then go that way. But government policies, it will be great if we're able to get all of policy to look one way. Because if it does, then it helps investors, finances, and everybody who's interested in just moving the needle forward. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. I hope my finance team is proud of me.
I'm sure they are. Thank you for those points, Ibilola. So I'll be passing on to Jennifer now. So here I'll be saying that with your experience in directing interventions, data and intelligence, policy and regulatory support at NOMAP, can you provide information on government initiatives, incentives, and available financing options for energy solutions?
Okay, so I'll tie this to also what NOMAP has done in that regard as well. So it's with regards, my co-panelists have touched on what the government is doing. So I think I'll just give a little bit to what NOMAP has done in that regard. So like I earlier talked about in the very beginning when I gave the overview of what NOMAP has done thus far. So moving on to the later part of the year, say from COVID year up until today, what we've then done is, so we've moved on, realizing that the market has grown. There's the gradual, the baby starts to grow, crawls first and then starts to walk. So from there, at first it was data and intelligence and the consumer payment having to figure out a way to integrate mobile money. And then today it's then productive use, right? We have the mini grids existing in the communities, but how do we figure out a way for the community, for the mini grid itself to be able to utilize the capacity that is being built in there, and for the communities itself to be. We both know that, or we all know that, to create economic development in wherever, but you need to be able to support that to work. So in that regard, what NOAP has done has been essentially funding quite a number of developers. Even here, of course, we also did it off with you guys. We funded quite a lot of developers in the sector to be able to deploy productive use facilities across one of their select mini grid locations. And what far is them to be able to then create a way for them, because it's not just, let's not forget that it's a business. People have to make, it's not just system cost as far as sometimes $50 million to deploy, maybe say 50 kilowatt system and above, and I don't want to start calculating how many years it would take you collecting 200 naira per kilowatt hour from a customer to then realize that money in the long run. So it's for you to then figure out creatively to be able to at least make sure that the communities that the mini grids are existing in are financially independent in some sort of way, which could then be from figuring out a way to deploy say productivity appliances in there, because there are communities in rural communities, but still somebody still sells sachet water, right? Somebody still sells a bottle of Pepsi. Somebody still, I mean, their neighbor will still figure out a way to sew clothes, right? And rather than having to have them rely on generators to make refrigerators work, how about we fund developers to supply generators to those communities? How about we supply developers to supply sewing machines to those communities, which we have done, and we've seen how catalytic it has been, even increasing the revenue of some of these customers. Moving on from there is something I'm quite very interested about, agriculture. We live in the city, but we forget that most of the food that we eat comes from the villages, those communities where we think that we don't want to go to, right? So, but how about we figure out a way to make sure that they have the necessary cash, appliance, processing tools, whatever it might be, to scale. So we sort of took a step back and then went back to the original initial developers that we sort of funded that to sort of expand the conversation to figure out what they were doing or what was even existing in the communities that they had their mini grids in. And having had those conversations with them, we realized that, okay, apparently most of these mini grids are existing in communities where you have very large inputs of agricultural produce. For example, some of the ones that we are funding, there's literally like it's a hub for rice, for literally like rice processing. So rather than having to leave them to their own demise of figuring out a way to process their rice, so we funded developers to set up rice processing facilities in some communities. Somewhere in the West, we also did the same thing with also funding developers to set up cocoa drying facility. Apparently, those things cost a lot of money because I mean, 100 kg of cocoa costs about 200K. So you can imagine what it will cost for you to just set up a processing facility for somebody to at least dry their cocoa. And one farmer can bring you more than 3x of 100 kilograms of cocoa, right? So I mean, just thinking of these numbers is already enough mind-opening opportunity for you to think of ways to, of course, like expand all of those things. So I mean, essentially, so what we've done is with NOMAP is figuring out a way to improve and scale capacity utilization of the grid in those locations, and also figuring out a way to make sure that customers in those locations are not just paying for power, but we're also supplying them with the need to use the power that they have, which could be in however way that they can. If they have sewing machines, fine, I give an electric one. Don't use your manual ones anymore. I give you electric, you use it on the mini grid. If you have a farm, okay, how about I supply figure out a way to give you solar irrigation systems, right? So it's just being creative to figure out a way to make sure that people back in the rural communities are not just left to their subsistence ways.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for those points. I believe at the core of it, we know what the problem is generally, which is around what it is we're talking about, how we can enhance energy access. We have a large gap and we require a lot of people to be able to come into the sector and support. We know generally within the sector, there are a couple of names you might be hearing often, but we know that we need to be able to bring in more people. That's why a lot of programs are currently ongoing that developing capacity of private sectors that are looking to come into the space. We know financing is key, but before we even get to the financing part, like Jennifer has highlighted, there's so many value chain in this energy sector. You don't always have to build the mini grid. You don't always have to deploy the solar systems. You can come in from the agric nexus. You can come in from the processing. You can come in from transportation. You can come in from different angles. Like we say, energy is a catalyst. Once energy is present, you can layer on a lot of things. So I think my charge to any company that is looking to come in, first is to understand the subsector you like to come in, understand the government policies and initiatives that are available in the sector. There are a lot of incentives that have been given, maybe when you're bringing in panels and so many other things that government has put in place. We have the Electricity Act that has opened up the sector, state government. You can say, okay, now it's time for me to go back to my state, to my village, and do ABCD. And I'm trying to do a rollout of projects in my state. That is something that you can do. We've spoken about some financing options. The truth is, all these informations are out there. Companies that are accessing this financing are leveraging the information that they know. Events like this, which is a public awareness event, can give you the opportunity to know what's happening in the sector and also allow you to network. A lot of people that are in this room or online or someone that knows someone could have the answers to whatever questions that you might be thinking. I always like when I hear about companies coming into the sector because I know that it means that there are more hands that are working towards granting all of us universal access to sustainable energy solutions. So I will stop here for a minute before we go into the last segment of our panel to open up the floor for questions. If anybody has any questions about what we've spoken so far, we started the journey from talking about public awareness to renewable energy technologies. What are renewable energy technologies? What are some examples of renewable energy technologies? How can we promote faster adoption of these technologies? We went into energy efficiency. What are some tips from the rural aspect to the urban areas that we can easily implement or that we know about, that we feel that are relevant? Just now we spoke about government policies, initiatives, and financing. So if anybody has a question, you could. Okay, please, someone, microphone, please. Can we start front and center? Mr. David Arinze, we'll come to you, Mr. Shegun.
Thank you so much. Brilliant contributions from the panelists, I must say. Really excited to be here. Thanks to next year, 99th edition. It takes a lot of balls to do that. My question is to you, Ibi, and also to you, Jennifer. Within the sector, the first one to Jennifer, within the sector, you see that in rural communities, there's that nudge to create productive, to catalyze productive use. And you begin to see that agro-processing plants or facilities are useful. One challenge that I have grown to also see is the over-availability of processing plants that now tend to run under. Crops are seasonal. And you see that within these communities, you may have developed or designed like a rice processing plant. And you know that within certain periods of the year, these plants may almost be doing nothing. You design an oil processing plant, for example. An oil processing plant, there are certain times of the year where they can process your oil because there's a lot of product. How do you manage commercial viability? When you're trying to prove that this is investment worthy, it's a good venture to go in when you know that you may not be able to make money all year round as a result of limitations in supply. So it'd be great to hear how you're tackling those issues and get some of your insights. To you, Ibi, and also I can extend it to Jacqueline. Clearly, we have a huge gap when we need to effectively communicate how we need to approach customer-centric behavior to availability of electricity. If you see a situation, I've seen it a lot of times where people, maybe if there's electricity from the grid, yes, they may be on prepaid meters, but they may be leaving and they may not want to turn off their AC so that when they come back, even if they take light, the room is still cold and they can use the coolness that it generates. How are we able to, as a communication specialist and also looking at what you do at CTH, how can we better communicate effective energy use in the most granular way possible so that people can begin to understand the concepts around energy efficiency. Even energy from the grid needs to be efficiently used, I believe. And how do we communicate this? Because when you have devices that don't need to run, you are invariably providing energy access that can be used by other consumers who do not have. So how do we really begin to think about effective ways to help customers, consumers like you and I, who may not even be experts or may not even be in the energy space, but understand this phenomenon and how their participation is crucial to us helping us advance our goals within the energy sector. Thank you.
Okay, let's answer so that we don't, or do you want to take all the questions?
I'm fine with the questions. Do you just want to pause to answer first? Maybe Lola?
Okay, Mr. Shegun.
Thank you so much. My name is Shegun Adaju. I also, I consult and develop projects. And yes, Bilola, I agree with you. You can go off grid.
Go upgrade.
So, 26th of November this year will be 10th year anniversary that I'm completely off grid
Wow.
in Lagos. Right. So it's doable. So I also commend the great work that all of you, from Haven Hill to Roma, of which I'm on the board of advisors, to SC for all. VTO, I met, Sonkele yesterday, and I also read the report of the Genset in Lagos. Everybody needs to read that report. And of course, there was a time also where, with Clinton, we were going around Nigeria, Kaduna, Eastern part, Kogi State, awareness. So I agree, there is a lot that still needs to be done.
Yeah.
Today, the issue of solar does not arise anymore. Okay. And I want to cite an example of a program that Lighting Africa did some years back that helped Pico solar systems. Right. So I wonder most times that, and I hope everybody can also wonder, how on election day materials get to the remotest parts of Nigeria for votes, right? And I'm just imagining an organization like National Orientation Agency, their role. Yesterday at an event by NCCC, a woman came and said, after I was on the panel, and says he has never heard about what I'm saying, that they can buy solar and pay by installments, right? So, your office and anyone can also share their views about this idea. How can we, for example, work with, is it National Orientation Agency, is it election, is there INEC they call it, so that when they are taking their materials to those remote, we also tag along with information about what's happening in the space. A lot of things are happening in the space that in the last mile, they are still not aware. And private sector players like us, we have limited funds. I'm doing business. So how can governments really, get into this game? Because it's also in their interest to be able to generate energy for Nigerians, and it's a political point for them. Okay, 17 states currently in Nigeria, they are cut off from the grid.
Wow.
17. So I would like to hear from you how you think this is possible.
Good evening. My name is Kumashi, and my question is to Ibiola. So, with regards to raising public awareness of renewable energy technologies, you mentioned something about segmenting society, and you talked about gathering stories from the elite. People have transitioned off grid, and then you talked about rural communities as well. But I was curiously waiting for you to talk about the average Nigerian. When discourse around transitioning to solar to green energy comes up, if you go on Twitter, you see people talk about it's not that easy, it's very expensive. But we hear that there are businesses that they are offering services to businesses, allowing them to pay in installments, helping them transition, soften the cushion of transitioning to renewable energy. But for the average Nigerian, it's like even energy efficiency is plenty grammar, off AC, off refrigerator, but then transitioning to solar or other renewable energies expensive to them. So how are we approaching that? I'm also in communications, and I'm curious about how we can, tackle that, because you give them you approach somebody, talk about preaching, the gospel of switching to clean energy, and the first thing they ask you is, okay, give me a quote. And you give them, and that's the end of the conversation. It's not it's not realistic to them. So how do we approach that? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mercy Ohamuche, and I have a comment and a question. My comment would be basically layering on what I didn't quite get her name, but what she said about the average Nigerian, right? In this conversation, I noticed that there was a lot of talk around renewable energy at some point, or going off grid at some point. Bilola stated clearly that she would advise that you just go off grid, right? But what happens to the average Nigerian, like she said, that is really struggling? And if we're looking at enhancing energy access, right, we are looking at mostly rural communities, which most of the people there have very low socioeconomic capacity. There is a very high inability to pay for, that kind of service. So what can we say to those people? I think in that case, we'll be looking at relying on grid extension, which brings me to my question. How do we create the balance between communicating energy efficiency, right, and in a way that it doesn't jeopardize the financial, the liquidity status of the on-grid players, in a way that they can, or they are better financially placed to extend the grid, to carry out network expansion projects and take supply to those rural communities where they can afford to pay for even solar or renewable energy infrastructure, even by installments. Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Should we take this one first? Okay, sorry, before we, sorry, sir, I know you've been raising up your hand, please. Let's just answer some of these questions so we don't lose anyone along the way. Jennifer, do you want to start?
Yes, I can start. So this is answering David Amin's question. So essentially, commercial viability of the crops, and also making sure that there is year-round use of the processing facility you end up deploying. So this is quite interesting because I was still having this call with one of our developers yesterday, and I was worried as well because I'm like, that happens, we sort of put in millions here. So one of the interesting things I've come to realize is, rather than focusing on why is this not, but how about we expand the capacity of the farmers to be able to scale to do more? I mean, my question was, is there a way for us to sell, give you guys improved seedlings, and then create a storage facility to make sure that, okay, if you were doing maybe say 5,000 hectares before, maybe you can then do 10. Figure out a way to give you money to buy extra land, right? Figure out a way to get you crops and seedlings to then grow more, so that at least there's something that you can then maybe say that will last you to the next farming season. And this is very, I have like 2 examples to give for this. For example, one of the projects that we're doing, one of the developers, it's green peppers. And my question was, okay, what then happens? It's about 90 days to grow green peppers from the nursery to the greenhouse system. So my question is, what then happens when you move from nursery to greenhouse? Will the nursery be empty? What then happens when you get from the greenhouse to harvest? Will the harvesting be empty? So I start asking questions around, who are your off-takers? Is it possible to ensure there's a year-round supply of this peppers available for your customer? And you're like, okay, let's figure out a way to make sure that for every point in time, once you move from this to this, you're planting new ones. So that is then making sure that availability of an off-taker first, because you don't also then want to produce and not have somebody take it off from you. So this is from the aspect of peppers and cocoa drying. So it's a drying facility that we have. And like I would always say, I typically like to think of things not just from one perspective. I have a cocoa drying facility, but I can dry something. I can dry yam flour with it. The yam. I can dry pineapple with it, and pineapple like whatever it is that you can do. So for me, it is not just relying or just asking myself, why is this processing facility not functioning as it should? But then thinking of a way to improve or even like establish the farmers to make sure that they have a lot more, which I think is what most agriculturists are thinking of today with improved seedlings. Seedlings that can grow better even when they pass their planting season. So I think so that's what we have done, what we're currently doing at NOMAP to ensure that the farmers or the developers that we're working with are also sending the conversation to their farmers as well to make sure that, because clearly if those processing facilities are not in use, there's no how I can pay back the money that they are giving me, or what, there's no how they can pay back the money I am giving them. So it's also my business to make sure that they have enough to run through those period. Someone asked a question around creating, yes, it was creating access. So for me, it is, I think, the information that we have around renewable energy, I think sometimes we like to play the fifth of, I don't know what is happening, or I'm not trying to accept it. It is getting into every single corner of the society. For example, I was speaking to, apparently I realized that the Chamber of Commerce, there's literally like a women Chamber of Commerce, like another institute out of that. Then for each of those women Chamber of Commerce, it exists in every single state in Nigeria. And for every of those states, it is then channeled to of the respective women that have literally like some form of agricultural input or whatever. If you go through that method, I think you sort of done a little bit of work in capturing that specific market. And I mean, I'm saying this from the perspective of sort of like spreading the branches. There is a chamber in Abuja here. Apparently, there's a women chamber in Abuja here. And for my conversations with her, it spreads into Plateau, Abia State, Nasarawa, down to the west. So how about we start from each of those areas? And I think it's the same way that literally all of this INEC information passes around, because they have to go through those areas. Because I mean, the DG wherever it is, stay in Abuja or Lagos, don't even have those information. But it's these guys that will collect all the information back together. And I think it's also, I mean, it's just literally making sure that for me, my ears start to tingle when I hear of organizations that have a footprint in several communities and have branches. The moment I realize you have a branch, I realize in my head, I'm thinking, okay, perfect, I can disseminate information through you. Yesterday, I was having a conversation and it was about NAOA, Nigerian Army Wives. Apparently, I knew someone that was telling me that, oh, he can get into like 10,000 of them. And for me, I was thinking, perfect. That is enough power systems to get to every single one of them. But let's not forget that Nigeria still have an entitlement mentality where we refuse to pay for stuff. There is, can I get it for free? And that is some of the things that we then need to start reorienting people to make them change, because clearly if you don't buy something, in my opinion, you don't value it. So the moment you have a skin in the game, which is sort of what we do at NOMAP as well, as much as we fund these developers, they must give us some certain level of equity, which shows that they have a skin in the game, meaning that they won't just let their processing facility just lie fallow. They would also do some work to make sure that it definitely scales. I know it's not easy to do all of these things. It will take a lot of frustration because it's making calls and getting no's and having to speak to people that probably will not even give you an answer or don't even know what you're talking about. But the moment you keep hounding and hounding and hounding, you will get it. Before I hand over to Ibelola to answer some of the questions that she had, I would like to sort of touch a little bit on the person that the lady that talked about how to make electricity available and sort of if grid extension can be that option. I will go back to math. I don't like math, but I'm forced to do math because of the work I do now. But so looking at mathematics today, Nigeria is currently about 200 million people, and the grid currently gives us about 4,800 megawatts, right? With that number, we still literally have blackouts. Like in the last 1 month, we've had like 4 or 5 series of them, right? And where I'm from, I don't know where you're from. I don't know how power is serviced to the locations where you live in. Where I'm from, there are distribution lines across, but there's no power in those communities, right? So, but then you go to meet some of this grid, you meet AEDC or you meet EEDC, or you meet Ikeja Disco, and for them it's running the numbers because it's a business after all. Um, their customers are not necessarily the ones that would pay the kind of money that the rural customers will most likely be given in terms of they're extending the grid and they're extending the grid with distribution cables, assets, and the rest of it. And those things that obviously cost millions. So for them, they are rather looking for maximum demand users. Hence why they are majorly in the cities. Hence why you have the Magodo project where it's more or less like, okay, I give you 24 hours or 20 hours, you pay me. That is music to their ears because they already see that there's money coming in constantly from these guys. It's still a struggle for developers to sort of get money from their customers in the villages. Hence why there's a conversation that, of course, it's already existing that not every single village or not every single rural community today should be a mini grid community. That conversation is already there. There are some that should just be one panel on the roof and maybe say 4 light bulbs inside the house because that is what that cost. That is what that family can pay for. There are some also existing in that same community that maybe have a pure water factory or has a car wash. You can give him something way bigger than that. So it's essentially figuring out all of the math behind it, all the finances. So I would say before we say or before we jump to say, oh, let's do this, I think take a step back and ask yourself, can this guy pay for this? And what is the financial implication for the developer that would most likely be extending the grid or that will most likely be deploying solar systems in those areas? I'll pause to let Jacqueline and Ibilola answer some of the other questions.
Okay. Sorry, let me start with David. So how can we effectively communicate about electricity and energy efficiency practices? First, I think that I would say that I think that the National Electricity Regulatory Commission and the DISCOs need to have consumer lines. I think if this, yes, phone lines, because I think that that's something the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission was trying to do, to get customers, they should have people that can feedback, they can relay their angst or issues to, and so they can get feedback on, oh, we don't have these issues. It's just a serious problem in Nigeria, but that's what I think that NERC and all of those people. But I'll not tie it to one other question, I can't remember who now, about how to effectively communicate that to rural areas. I think that in the Nigerian culture, which is, we have almost 250 ethnic groups, I think it's a treasure trove of different communication methods. I'm Yoruba, and I'm a Yoruba girl. One of the things I know that we do is we have something called Ewi. It's called Ewi, right? It's like a storytelling form of passing on information. Now, these are some of the things that, well, hopefully we're trying to design for communities, like depending on, I'm just using myself, right? So if I went back to Belkota, for example, or I went to Oshun or went to Oshogo or somewhere, I could deploy AV because that's something that my people understand and, and would listen to. Imagine if somebody came and said, oh, we need to adopt this, and I did co-write some AV a few months back with someone, and it was very melodious to hear. But then if we took that to the community, and they had to say that over and over again, it's only a matter of time. And one of the things I want to point out here is that energy transition is a marathon. It's not something that's going to happen overnight or in 5 years or 10 years. It's going to take time. And because it will take time, you're going to have to develop patience and you're going to, and a consistent messaging. Because how are you going to encourage people to leave what they don't know? I mean, underserved communities, and say, oh, yeah, come and move to this other one. Energy access and this renewable energy deployment, of course, will help to get to those things quicker. But for other communities where they're on grid already, it's going to be a challenge. But I believe that our culture has a lot of communication methods. And if I were to go around the room, for example, and ask each person, where are you from? How do they communicate? Some people is town criers. Other people is there are different methods, and I think that these are some of the things. But I will point out here at this junction, the former government communicator, communication is expensive. Let's not lie, let's not steal. It is super expensive. And when Dr. Shegun was like, oh, NOA people, oh, that's lovely, sir. But like she said, these people, and let me give you an example. And I think because I have this experience. For example, Empower was a federal government program. Let me just using that as an example. And it was open to all Nigerians, right? And what this was that you're supposed to take graduates and put them as teaching assistants, healthcare assistants, and then agriculture extension assistants in different states across the country. Now, as a federal government program, I don't know what is happening in Ebonyi or what the schools are in Ebonyi, right? And so what we'll do is we will partner with the state governments. Do you know how many state governments took their time before agreeing to participate in this federal government program? It happened with that. It happened with federal with the homegrown school feeding program as well. So it happened that certain states would start and some other states would follow. It's the same thing with communication. You cannot, as federal government, legally go and start implementing stuff in states. You have to get the buy-in of state governments. It's the same thing with communications. You have to go through this route. And for our state governments, God bless them, that are very quick on their feet. Sometimes it depends on the governor, it depends on the government. Is this renewable energy important to me? No. Is it politically? No. We shove it to the side. So what we can do is stay, in this space and say, well, everybody, here's an option. Try and take it. If you love it, God bless you, And that's what we can do. But if we were to go down that route, and it will cost money, but if it was possible to get everyone's buy-in on time, I'm sure there'll be people that will fund that sort of thing. The other thing would be, and someone said something about, all of these solar panels and saying, come and pay small. There's a reputational risk. If, for example, the Energy Transition Office says, go and buy solar from this person selling, is able to give you, Yes, it's able to give you a loan. It's able to give you the solar panels ahead where you can pay, small by small. Yeah, installments. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. And what happens is you will trust that person because the Energy Transition Office says so. And if that person disappoints you, we run a reputational risk. So while we want to get everyone to adopt it, and that's our desire, right? We have to be careful not to put you into trouble, right? And anyone, for example, who says that they're going to give you a figure for transitioning your home system, for example, without doing an audit of your home, I'm sorry, I think it's a scammer. So you have to, these are the nuances, I think, to these conversations I just wanted to point out. So I thought just hand over to, because I can talk a lot.
Okay. I think you said some of the things that I wanted to say. So there's some banks that offer for the financing for the solar panels. I know Access Bank offers loans, FCMB offers loans for people to be, Sterling as well, to be able to pay, bit by bit. While this is great and that's a source of financing, again, I don't think I don't know the modalities around how they give out these loans. And the downside to it is that now not everyone will be able to access that loan because the bank will also check your ability to pay back that loan. So the average person, as you put it, the average person might be able, because I don't know if there's still any average person in Nigeria anymore, but that's, the average person might be able to access that loan, but what about those who are not so privileged, right? And so that's another thing. And then to speak to the putting out the message of renewable energy, like she spoke about the IWI. I know this is the first time I'm hearing about it. One of the things that we have done at Clean Tech Hub to spread the messages, to try and put it in different local dialects that people can understand. But then there's so many dialects in Nigeria that, one person cannot do it all. So I think it's something that, we need to work on. And maybe also door-to-door campaigns and breaking it down in simple language that people can understand. Because someone like me, if you load me with too much information and too much grammar, I can easily just, log out. Like I can zone out while you're talking. And for these people, if you come and speak, too much grammar, they may not understand what you're saying. Another thing is also infographics and how you put things. I remember when I was trying to learn about intellectual property and all of that. Like every time I tried to read about it, it was just too much information. But I went to this event, and they put it in like this colorful, what do I call it? Sort of like a brochure thing, and there were pictures, and it was very easy to understand. So also breaking it down for people to be able to understand it, people understand what they see a lot as well. Yeah, so I would also say that's another thing that we can do.
What she said, 65% of human beings are visual learners. And I think in the past decade that I've been working in communications, I'm very big on visuals, because a lot of us would have had better grades in school if we weren't writing copious notes, and there was just some picture, or something explaining it graphically. So when you think about, there's no good or effective communication that doesn't understand the psychology of the humans that you're dealing with. And so if 65% of humans worldwide are they're visual learners, then you have to employ that in whatever communication messaging that you're doing. I'm just wanting to include that.
Yeah, I don't think so. Let me answer the question about how to make it realistic. When she talked about quotation, that you go to ask for the price and then they send you a quote. If you check on Jumia today for solar system, you would see one that has a fan, that has one battery, if I'm not mistaken, and one panel, and it's going for about 200 and something K. The day I saw that, I was impressed, to be honest, because of how very detailed it was. Because they didn't ask me for quotes, to be honest, just to buy that system. I just went on Jumia. The same way you go to buy like regular stuff on Jumia, you find it there, and it was so detailed that it would tell you what it would power. But of course, because I know the system and I know how the market, I know that system would not last for up to 2 months in your house. It will pack up. So this is more or less like an open conversation for developers in the room. I understand the necessity for quotes, right? But I think that for the very basic average Nigerian, because I think this question has come to me more than like 4 times in the last 2 or 3 months that, oh, I want to buy a system. This is what I want to power. Find it for me. And I'm like, okay, I know you need a quote, but is it possible that we can go online and then you just maybe say like the Jumia, yes. How about somebody like, yes, you mentioned you have an establishment. How about you partner with the Jumia, right? Jumia can get a percentage of whatever it is that you sell, and then you have the technicality, they have the audience. That's a very big break for you at that point. So for me, is as much as it's not necessarily affordable, I think that there are options that are. I think that we are heavily cheated on the renewable energy market side because of the fact that we're not exactly paying cost per what we're getting from the grid. It's heavily subsidized on this part, right? So on that note, I would say that versus you having to buy yourself a generator that maybe give you the same thing that maybe or maybe more than what a one panel or maybe say a 1 kilowatt system will give you or 2 kilowatt system will give you. I think your peace of mind and the lack of having to and the less of having to go down to turn off your generator at 2 a.m. I think it's a good trade-off if you ask me, to be honest. Right? Having to maybe still have light all through the night, at least having something that immediately ADC or wherever your supplier goes off, your backup power kicks in immediately, as compared to having to run a generator where it goes off, you have to go downstairs to go power that up. So for me, it's not necessarily very affordable, but I think that there are options to make it work. And some people are doing it well, but unfortunately for us, it's just giving us a bad record because those systems don't exactly last the time that they're supposed to last. We both know that the lead acid battery can give you about 3 years if you use it. I've had mine for maybe say 3-4 years now, and it's doing fantastic. Right. But if you go buy from these guys that are not necessarily registered and know what you're doing, you still come back to say, oh, it's not working. Taking us back to as far back as 2014 again. So it is a plea to the developers in the room, the companies in the rooms, rather than we having to ask customers like us for quotes. How about you just put it on there? We know that you're legit and you do the good work. Just tell us you need to power your light, your fan, specify the fan, box fan or 200 watts fan, your television, the watts, your phones and everything, and you're good. You can then stagger that in terms of the sizes. 1 kilowatt for this, 2 kilowatt for that, and whoever it is that wants to make a choice, it's a lot more easier because to be honest, if you start asking me for quote, I do you one, I do you two, I come back, I go back. I've literally almost lost interest in that conversation with you.
Okay. So thank you everyone for all the points that you have made. I believe a lot of things has been said in terms of answering your questions. I know that basically from what Jennifer is saying regarding a marketplace where we could have this thing, this place for the sector where people can come in, find reputable companies, be able to do some of these assessments right online. I know Solar Marketplace is trying to solve this to an extent, which is done by the which is funded by the Dutch government. I know Chibi on, but I know it's someone that can really comment on that. I also see that because given the amount of things that we have said here, I know that if any, let's say someone that has the idea or the interest in entering this, there's so many verticals that you can come in from. A lot of things that we have said, there are things that we haven't really solved yet. We're still learning on the journey, but these are pockets that we believe that anybody could plug in and provide your expertise into it. So we have a very eager gentleman over there at the back that has been wanting to ask his question. So please, can you pass over the mic to him? After his question, we'll go to the last round of panel
Yeah.
discussions. Then we come back for another round of questions after that. So let's just have his own. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Ejike Umunebike. I think I have to congratulate the all-female panelists. I'm quite impressed by your input processes. Yes, like I was saying, I'm quite impressed by your input processes individually, because it's good to know that what a man can do, a woman can do even much better. Yes, that's using the Nigerian expressive thought. This is the second time I'm attending this program, and the first outing was quite impressive, but this is much more enthralling, I must say. My question would go to my question goes thus: talking about deploying or using effective public awareness campaign tools to enhance or deepen conversations on the compelling concept of enhancing energy access in Nigeria. How do you intend to drive home the messaging beyond just proffering divergent views and perspectives by these all-female panelists? That's the first question. Then the second question goes to Lady Bilola. Yes, she talked about, there was something that she harped on, which is about the inconsistency in policy directives by various governments, it being a cog in the wheel of progress in terms of having a stable, framework that can drive renewable energy or any brand of energy in a projection nationwide. That, I think, is a very valid point she made. And I also want to have the last question, which is about all of you going to be hub as a platform. The image makers of Mr. President in such a way that whatever thought processes have been will be applied into actionable terms by having them understand the basic rules that govern renewable energy conversations, because most people don't understand, even the media. How often do you engage the media, like the NNPC does, some other organizations, to ensure that the members of the public, the individuals who are products of society, understand what most of these concepts are and how they can, be incorporated maybe having like somebody thought about using different languages. But beyond that too, most people are not too literate, and most Nigerians, to say the least, don't have patience for listening to long stories or even things that will make them read or write. It's distractive to them. So are there some ways that we can dramatize this using theater artists to drive home most of your messages, and then partnering with agencies like National Orientation Agency, the different handlers of the Mr. President, all of them have different designations. So you can write to them, have a meeting with them, and then they can understand your worries and pains. So Mr. President will be much more guided in giving directives, policy directives on how the renewable energy ecosystem can work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for all your questions. I believe in asking some of your questions, you've also kind of given us very good suggestions on how we could address that. I don't know if anyone on the panel would like to take a jab at that.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the question. So I can speak what we try to do at the Energy Transition Office. One of the things that I do in my role is convene working groups. The Energy Transition Plan has 5 verticals: power, cooking, industry, which is subdivided into petrochemical, steel, and cement, transport, and oil and gas. And so one of my roles is that we convene working group meetings on these sectors and then review, talk about the status of things, what should be improved on, and then forward that information to government. So yes, there's a pipeline of some sort where we sort of share things from sector players and and just people in the industry back to government, and they're always very receptive. But as to whether it can be shared with the media aides of the president, that is a different thing. And having worked in government, you cannot promote exactly what your principal isn't. So an aide may say, okay, you know what, I like this idea of electric vehicles. And if your principal is promoting CNG, you can't do that because you exist to promote and amplify the policies of the government that you serve, right? So it's beyond them. And media, that the current setup of communications and media is that they're like almost last mile. It's when everything has been decided, like, okay, guys, take and share to the public, and not very often do our communicators rather, or government communicators, part of the initial decision making. For the people that are, and when we were in government, is that you're able to point out inconsistencies so that it helps to guide. I don't know what the current setup is, but I just wanted to communicate that it might not be easy to just sit with media aides. They don't have the final power as to what goes out. Anything they say is anything they say is a reflection of their principal and the government. So they have to be careful, right? They just have to say whatever they're told to say and say it in how they feel like saying it, but it still has to be the same thing. Yeah, I think, yes, like I said, people don't like to read, it is true. And this is why I mentioned a week the last time. It's like, I don't know, how many people are here? Please help me, okay? So it's like, there's a way they say it. I wish, we had like a screen or something so I could play so you could hear. So it was like something, and they're saying this nice, very thick Yoruba language that sometimes I have to like, what are they saying? But and there are different forms of arts that can do that. I think climate conversations, energy transition conversations are expanding. It was not a major topic many years ago, but it's taking center stage now. And so all of these ideas, like dramatizing it, theater arts, I think that some other people, not me, will take it on and begin to expand, what that would look like for people so that they're able to adopt renewable energy technologies quicker. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Bilala, for those comments. I believe in answering some of his questions, we've already kind of gone into the last segment of our questions, which I believe you've already answered the question for you. So for Jennifer and Jacqueline, we'll be talking about how community involvement by engaging local leaders and influencers to drive grassroots participation in sustainable energy initiatives. I would like to highlight the point of sustainable because we know a lot of initiatives are being taken into the rural communities, and we know, say for example, mini grids that have lifespan, and we know how key the role community engagement and stakeholder awareness is in driving the buy-in and the continuous willingness to pay of these projects in rural communities. And we know that the sustainability of projects is heavily dependent on the financial viability of that project, meaning as long as you're able to get this payment from these customers and having a good rapport and relationship with them, that project keeps staying online for as long as possible. So in your experience, can you explain the relevance and how local leaders have been able to ensure that their respective communities are able to practice sustainable energy practices?
Oh yeah, thank you for that. First thing I'll say is kudos to the REA because I don't think that you can deploy any power system today in Nigeria without the buy-in from the local communities that you have that you want to deploy your system in. I mean, with all of the forms and all of the documentations that you have to fill, there's a section that caters to how involved is the community in this, and of course, then looking at the gender lens for that as well. There needs to literally be like a woman on the team to then also give her view with of how it would affect the prospective female customers or women customers that would end up having these systems. So taking this then back to the communities and even then speaking from the perspective of some of the finances and also some of the developers as well. It is, for me, it is seeing is believing, and you cannot do anything. I don't believe that you deploy something and then you just let it go. One of the things I used to say, or I would always say, is when that very smooth, easy pathway for a two-way conversation with you and the company that's developing the systems in there. One of the things I like to do is, or while I was still working on the field, was for every of the locations where I have mini grids existing in, I always made sure that my staff came from the community itself. As much as yes, I'm required to sort of get like workforce from my team back like in the office, then had to be some percentage of my team members that came from the community. That gives the community members some sort of subconscious understanding that we are all in this together. If this is not working, there's no money in my pocket. Right. So that then made sure that if there is no power, they call my phone. If something has happened, they call my phone. If the panels are dusty, before they call me, they have gone ahead to clean it. They don't have to call me to ask me how should we do this. So for me, the most important thing is making sure that there is a community ownership and ensuring that everybody has a buy-in. Okay, this person has a borehole there. He wants to supply power. I would have to go in there to make sure that at least it's you. Like I would always say, you cannot situate a business that you don't even understand what is going on. You always have to go in once in a while to understand what goes on in there. And like I would always say, it's very important to make sure that whatever it is that you do, there's some local content that comes in from the community where it's in.
Yeah, thank you very much for those points, Jennifer. I'm handing over to Jacqueline. Finally, can you briefly speak on what role can the private sector play in engaging local leaders to drive grassroots participation in sustainable energy initiatives?
Okay. So I would say maybe partnering with the local government because we tend to see that most of these renewable energy solutions are situated in the urban areas because That's where the market is. So, and that's like a challenge. So if we're able to partner with local governments, we work together with them, they go into the communities, they will help to, push those solutions. Another thing I would say is capacity building. If we're able to build capacity in the communities, it would be easier to, push this message of, okay, moving to renewable energy. It's better for us to do it this way than this way. I would say also public awareness campaigns. That's something that we can also do. And also engaging local businesses. If you train people in the communities as well, they would also be able to replicate what you've taught them by setting up those businesses, and also maybe provide them some funding as well. Look for some funding for them, or the local government can provide them with some funding to, fund them to be able to do all those things as well. I would say that would be some of the solutions that I can come up with.
Okay. Those are really great points. Okay, Ibrahim, please go ahead.
I just want to add for private sector, I think it would be local currency financing. I think that's such a big issue for developers and project owners. They have this FX volatility that they have to deal with. So if the private sector players in the commercial banks are able to give funding in local currency, I think that would be very helpful. As the private sector, as their own part, in this journey.
Definitely. I agree. So we've come to the end of the official plenary session and all our talks or what we have here to discuss. I think we have a few more minutes to take one or two questions. But before we take that, I want to take a question that we have from someone that is watching us online. Hello to our online audience. It's great to have you here, and I hope you are staying with us till this time. So we have a question from Mary Rose, and the question is actually for Jennifer. Says, I truly commend your approach of replacing those high energy consuming appliances with more energy efficient ones. In doing this, how do you manage customers' expectations or complaints, especially when there is a need to help them claim warranty on those appliances if they develop a fault within the warranty period? They don't know the suppliers, who they know is the middleman, which is you. So do you have any pointers to how the warranty system can work within the sector?
I think if I get her correctly, I think she's the middleman in this at this point. So I think for me, it is you have a business. I think it's for you to be able to at least stand your ground to make sure that, you're buying something. If you were using it yourself, I'm just asking based on just as critical here. If she was the customer herself and she was buying this particular item and she realizes that, okay, this is not doing me what it needs to do, she will want to return it back as well. So I think that even you standing your ground as the middleman and then asking and demanding that whatever it is that you're buying from the supplier itself carries the warranty tag that it says it should. I buy a fridge that was labeled 24 months warranty rather, and it develops a fault at 12 months, I will take it back. No, because you gave me 24 months.
True.
So it's the rights of the customer that bought it from you to claim warranty during the warranty period, right? So, but if you bought it and you didn't test it, I'm sorry to say you have to take it back. So I think, which is why, this is where all of the finances for businesses coming, where you need to have that caveat in your finances or in your sales that will cater to certain contingencies like this.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that point. Do we have any? Okay, you have one here. Okay, so we have one. Oh, three. Okay, that 1, 2, 3.
Three.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Timitokwe Omowome. Okay, I just wanted to speak briefly about communicating around energy efficiency. It's more like a contribution, really. And so the first thing about, how do we communicate to encourage people to, use renewable energy and more importantly, the energy efficient? I think it has to be very strategic communication. A lot of people have touched on it. A key thing is the messaging and understanding the people. We live in a prosperity and affluence-driven society. And I'm speaking anecdotally from my own experience in my household. I'm the chief energy efficiency officer that chases everybody around to put off the light. And I recall that one day, someone in the house came to me in the afternoon and said, "You're always shouting at us. Why are you using all your lights, all the lights in the afternoon?" I was like, I quickly understood why she said so. Because to the average Nigerian, when you tell them to be efficient, they start attributing it to poverty and lack. And so that's one of the key messaging that I wanted to say, because I told her that I actually shouting at you so that when I need this light for a Zoom meeting, put on all the lights in the house, I have access to it and I can use it justifiably. So that is one strategy we need to put into our messaging, which is the key thing that we need to communicate regarding energy efficiency. And Ibilola mentioned it. It's a marathon. You have to keep saying it. We can take it to elementary education, to schools, to universities, and all that. That will be the main contribution. And also to just think about something like the Power Dialogue. It's been a platform to educate for funding to also go to this kind of thing as a focus. That would be my contribution. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Victor. So good presentation to you, ladies. My question is, what incentives can be offered to individuals and businesses to become more energy efficient? Are there incentives? If there are, can we share? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take Mr. Chagi's questions finally.
Thank you so much. I want to try and make a final pitch and see if this will work. Because it's something I really, really believe in. This engagement with National Orientation Agency. Why am I so particular about this? Number one, I think this is the right time to be able to get that and get the government of Nigeria to understand that importance. Number one, we're signatory to the agreement, Paris Agreement. Number two, we have agreed that net zero will be 2060. So Nigeria is saying 2060, we have to achieve net zero. Number three, Nigeria has taken several loans to even promote what I'm talking about. 500 million World Bank for NEP.
Yeah.
$750 million. This is a loan that Nigerian government. So it shows clearly that, and I must honestly, I also commend the government of Nigeria on some efforts they have made. For example, the Nigerian the Electricity Act 2023 says that 30% of energy mix
must come from
renewables. I can give you 10 reasons why I think it is the proper time to ride on that wave and get Nigerian government to agree. And the ETO is strategically positioned. SC4, you've been part of government somehow, you know? And there was an event that Denike invited me to on clean cooking, that, you know, your ETO did a program around. And the information that came out of it was really very insightful. We need to take these messages to 774 local governments. And I think it's the NOA that can do it effectively. We can set up stakeholders, you know, who can make this happen. I'll be happy to be part of this. There are development partners that can fund this. I mean, if we make a strong case for it, because it will be, it's also going to be 10 years that my mom used kerosene lantern last in Kogi State. So maybe I had the privilege of being able to do that in that local government. But there are 773 others that they need to get that message. Let's make it, let's give it a try. I believe it will work.
Okay, thank you for the charge, Mr. Shenu, and also the comment from Mr. Temitope. I think to answer the question from Mr. Victor, I believe, where he asked if there are any incentives that we are aware of that can promote the adoption of energy efficiency or promote energy efficiency. So why would the average Nigeria feel like I should be energy efficient? What will I get from it? You know, we like to think that way.
So, I mean, to answer your question, I think your pocket is an incentive. I mean, I think that's the greatest incentive that you would have, because not having to spend like literally almost double the amount of money that you spend to be inefficient, I think that's enough really, because I don't know that the government would want to even champion any of those, because there's literally, I'm not sure that there's any other moment. If there is, I really do not know, and I would love to know that there is. But at the moment, I think our pocket is the greatest incentive that we have to be energy efficient, because I mean, like how much are we paying for power at the moment? And we hear that it's about to go up again in terms of the cost per, yeah, per kilowatt hour. So you can imagine you not being energy efficient.
Yeah, I agree, because we know that the sector is still heavily subsidized, and the core of it is that the cost of generating power is expensive. Power is not cheap. We've enjoyed subsidies for the longest, and now subsidies are being lifted up, and we're going to start seeing the true value of power. So I believe energy efficiency, like I said, even if you don't want to, you'll be forced to when you start noticing that, oh, I'm coming out of this room and I'm switching off the light unconsciously, because you know what you're spending. If you're spending 10,000 a month before, maybe a year ago, that's definitely not what you're spending now. So looking at the general socioeconomic status, generally how things are going up, I think your pocket is definitely the biggest motivator. But join us hang out with you this Wednesday evening. It's been a pleasure moderating. Great having all these very talented and intelligent ladies on this panel. I think we'll just wrap up here. I know that all the things we've said around enhancing energy access, energy efficiency, the role of local leaders, the role of storytelling, communication, how we get this awareness to the grassroots, either through storytelling, AWIs, or different strategies. I believe we've given a lot of points today that anybody can. Like I said, the challenge is we're running towards 90 million, and I believe a recent study has said from SFO said that even more people this year, the number of people that require energy access actually increased in 2024. So meaning whatever statistic we're running with, more people need power now. And again, not only is a big challenge that requires a lot of hands, there's so many verticals. You don't have to come from the energy access alone. You can come in from, you can solve our problems of storytelling and taking it to the grassroots. You can join the working group Mr. Shegun is interested in and be working towards grassroots dissemination of information. So there are different areas in this sector that you can come in. I know Mr. Temi Tokwe is in the GIS aspect and electrification planning. So there's so much we can do. I feel you just have to find a place and contribute towards it. We are Nigerian, for Nigerian, forever, whatever it is that we're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you
and
so
have a
much.
good evening.
That was really insightful, and thank you to our panelists, our wonderful panelists, and also to the participants for bringing your energy with your questions. We are rounding up now, and thank you all for coming for the 99th Power Dialogue. Hopefully we'll see you at the 100th next month. And behind refreshments for you guys, and you can, if you have other questions, you can ask after the event. Thank you very much,
Thank
and
you.
good night.
Thank you.